Well, first of all, thank you all for coming here today for what is, in essence, the third stop of our John Burton Harter and Patrick Angus tour. We have done similar iterations of this talk in New Orleans and New York at the Leslie Loman Museum 2 years ago, and we are thrilled to finally be here in Patrick Angus's hometown to have a similar discussion here today. And I want to start off by thanking our wonderful hosts, the Gabba Gallery, Elena Jacobson, her entire staff, including Erica, Jillian, and Louie. We so appreciate you hosting us. And well, this gallery is beautiful. I hope you've had a chance to look at the artwork and maybe even buy some of the artwork. Got to put in a plug for that. As you can see on the panel, the panelists are David S. Ruben Esparza, Min. I am not David S. Ruben. I am Brian Sands. Unfortunately, David Ruben was supposed to be here today. He was excited and looking forward to this, but he is regrettably at home nursing a cold, and he feels it is best not to risk giving it to anybody here. I just want to acknowledge, though, the tremendous work and effort that he had put into this panel discussion, and you will be seeing that in the course of the next hour or so. I want to thank him for his research and scholarship and hope that he gets well very soon. My name, as I said, is Brian Sands. I'm originally from New York. I live in New Orleans now, where I first met Bert Harter back in 1996. This was when I was the gallery director at the Lesbian Gay Community Center of New Orleans. I started there in 1994, and it was, when I say started, it was a volunteer position that I thoroughly enjoyed doing, presenting everyone from local artists, a few out-of-towners, one Pulitzer Prize winning editorial cartoonist, Walt Handelsman of the Times-Picayune, and a costume designer by the name of Roy Haylock, who you might better know as Bianca Del Rio. I think it was like September of 1996, we had an opening. We had shows like every month, every other month, had an opening. And afterwards, or during it, a gentleman approached me and very modestly said, I'm an artist. Would you be interested in maybe having a show of my work at the community center? I said, well, send me some images and we'll take it from there. And he did, and it was fabulous, and it was Bert Harter. And it was an interesting show in terms of most of the other shows, the work was for sale. And unlike most commercial galleries, we gave more money to the artists, and proud to say we still made some money for the center itself. Bert's work was not for sale. He had a book that he had published. He had some postcards, but none of the work was for sale, which I really didn't think about at the time. I later found out that, unlike most artists, he did not need the money, and we'll get to that in a little while, but we remained friends, and I would see him occasionally, and then one day in 2001, we got in touch and he invited me over to his new home and studio and storage facility in the Byward. I don't know if any of you know New Orleans, but it is just outside the French Quarter, maybe like 10, 15-minute bicycle ride. And so I went over there, and it was gorgeous. It was in, I think, an old building, but it was state-of-the-art storage facility, climate controlled for all his artwork, and it was just exciting to see, and you could see that he was really proud to have it as his home. He took a few photos of me that day, and about a month, 6 weeks later, he called me up and said, I have something for you. I had like, okay, sure. And he stopped by my place, and he surprised me with this, which he did from one of the photographs. So he is going to be with us in spirit today. And I think he'd be very proud and very pleased to have his legacy continue in this way. And before I forget, I'm going to take a photo of all of you from here. Smile. Okay. I did want to ask before starting off, how many of you prior to today had heard of Bert Harter? Okay. How many of you had heard of Patrick Angus? Okay. And just curious, how many are friends of Ruben here? And of Ken? Okay, so we have a nice range of people, and you are in for a treat today. And I say that having just discovered what David had in store for all y'all. Because as you now have this catalog that we came out with a couple of years ago, we meaning the John Burton Harter Foundation, about Bert and Patrick. And let me just add that in the aftermath of Bert's passing, his will establish this foundation to promulgate his art and support queer artists as well. A few years ago, it was 2021 or 2022, I interviewed Charles Leslie of the Leslie Loman Museum in New York, and he made reference to the fact that Patrick Angus influenced Bert's work. And that started the ball rolling with my colleague as one of the other advisors to the foundation, Jack Sullivan, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, to create and curate a show juxtaposing the two works, and out of that evolved this catalog. David did the essay for the catalog, and I would strongly encourage you to read it. It is fascinating. And some of the material that you will be hearing today is taken from that essay, but there's a lot more in the book, so it's really worthwhile. What you're going to hear today, though, is not merely what's in the book. I was really excited, and as you'll see, the images that you'll be seeing not only are those of Patrick and Bert, but juxtapose works that were their influences. So it's really good, and I really appreciate all that David did to do this. I next want to introduce our wonderful panelists who I just had the pleasure of meeting, but have gotten to know them from their online presence of their work, and their work is really amazing. Ruben Esparza is an independent curator whose wide-ranging practice encompasses painting, photography, and drawing realized in analog and digital forms. Esparza's art practice is not easily categorized, and that is very true. If you go to his website, there's a multiplicity of media there. Connecting meaningfully by exploring queer and Latinx histories, existential trauma, and the reconciliation of his heritage, that of the colonizer and the colonized within, and in conversation with the Western Mexica art canon. Esparza is the founder and director of Queer Biennial, an international survey of LGBTQ+ art and queer diasporas, and Queer Califas, centered on exhibiting queer Latinx artists. His art is in the collection of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the Museum of Contemporary Art, San Diego, and several other institutions. And Ken Gun Min, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah,
good.
That's correct.
And again, all I can say is having seen his wonderful work on his website, I just wish I could see it. I hope to see it in person because it's moving and interesting and fascinating and everything you want art to be. Is a Los Angeles-based painter whose paintings explore intimacy, masculinity, and representation across cultures while employing a mixture of Western-style oil paints, Asian pigments, embroidery, and beading on raw canvas. Often featuring nude and queer-coded men, his portraits and lush and vibrant landscapes concoct fanciful queer idols where longing, melancholy, and euphoria manifest irrespective of expectations imposed on people in daily life. Born in Seoul, Min lived in San Francisco, Zurich, and Berlin before settling in Los Angeles. His art is in the collections of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the Institute of Contemporary Art, Miami, the Speed Museum, Louisville, the X Museum, Beijing, and the Hessel Museum of Art at Bard College. I just want to start with a quote from Bert's book that he self-published in 1996, Encounters with the Nude Male, with a Male Nude, I'm sorry. And he wrote, "At the time of this writing, I have been turning out works of gay-oriented art for nearly 30 years, most of which almost no one has seen. These paintings are ghosts for me. I'm very conscious that art which touches on the sexual of whatever stamp is at greatest risk against survival. It is the first to be discarded or destroyed by the fanatical, the short-sighted, the religious and self-righteous, or worse, by the well-intentioned who would protect a reputation or a history by sanitizing the inheritance. Much gay-oriented art and history has been known to have been lost to the world, known only by the memory of its destruction. We cannot know how much was lost and never known at all. So we are here today to keep such art alive. These are two of the projects that David has organized, as I mentioned, and they were brought to us by him and presented by the John Burton Harter Foundation. And I want to acknowledge our other colleague, Alan Williams, who is here today from Atlanta and has been immensely helpful in putting all this together, and it's always great to see him. Now, okay. Patrick Angus, who work I had not known previously, but when I started exploring, absolutely loved, was born in 1953 in North Hollywood, California. In 1974, he studied at the Santa Barbara Art Institute, and in 1977, took courses at the College of Creative Studies, UCSB, where he was mentored by Gary H. Brown. Angus lived the life of the starving artist first in LA and then in New York. Although his work received little attention during his lifetime, there has been much interest in the past few years, and some of you may have seen the exhibition devoted to his work at the Long Beach Museum of Art in 2019. And John Burton Harter, known as Bert to friends, was born in 1940 in Jackson, Mississippi, and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. He received a BA in art history in 1953 from the University of Louisville and an MA in painting from Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge in 1970. He also took courses in South Asian Studies at the University of Pennsylvania and studied field archaeology at Hebrew University of Jerusalem. From 1967 to 74, Harter worked as a library assistant at the Louisiana State Museum, New Orleans. In 1974, he served as assistant curator of paintings at the Historic New Orleans Collection. How many of you have been to New Orleans? Okay, and how many of you might be familiar with the Historic New Orleans Collection? Okay, not too many. Historic New Orleans Collection is a museum, a gallery, right in the heart of the French Quarter that has been built up over the years, starting by, it was originally a couple's home, and when they passed, and they had a lot of money, it became what it is now known as a Historic New Orleans Collection. It's really a wonderful collection giving the history of New Orleans, and then they have various special exhibits. Just recently, they had a program there about the 40th anniversary of the Corner Pocket. And if any of you have been to New Orleans, the Corner Pocket is a bar on St. Louis and Burgundy Street that features dancing on the bar by danseurs to entertain the men. It is said to be John Waters' favorite bar in America. And I think if Bert knew that there was a panel discussion at the Historic New Orleans Collection, which has always been a kind of a staid organization, but it is changing now, he is smiling down at us at the thought that it hosted something like that recently. He then returned to the Louisiana State Museum, where he was assistant curator of visual art from 1974 to 86 and curator of collections from 1986 to 91. He had a few solo exhibits during his lifetime, including at the Lesbian Gay Community Center, but tragically his life was cut short when he was found murdered at his New Orleans home in 2002 by an unknown assailant, and that tragic thing remains unsolved. Jack and I have heard recently that there is I think a retired detective from the NOPD, New Orleans Police Department who wants to open the case again and finally find the assailant, but to be continued. Okay. Now this is what I was talking about. Angus found inspiration in depictions of male nude showerings by David Hockney, who was a patron of his. When he lived in Hollywood, Angus actually worked at a gay bathhouse, so it seemed a natural subject for him. And you can see the juxtaposition, I hope you all can see it on both sides, of Patrick's work on the left and Hockney's work on the right. Another influence on Angus was the Bay Area Figurative School, which was pioneered by David Park. Park and other Bay Area artists embraced the thick gestural brushwork of the New York-based abstract expressionists, but preferred to use it to portray traditional subjects such as landscape, still life, and as seen here in Park's work, the nude figure. Angus actually saw an exhibition of Park's work at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art when he was a student at UCSB, and observed that Angus's figures are always posed casually, as he was a realist in the sense that he wanted the viewer to experience what it was like to actually be in the place he was presenting. Angus was also enamored with Picasso, and one of the reasons he moved to New York was to see Picasso's work in person at the Museum of Modern Art. The raised arm in Angus's nude pose in his bathhouse scene is based on the pose from Picasso's well-known Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, which depicted prostitutes in a brothel. And interestingly, Patrick moved to New York, lived there for a while, just couldn't make a go of it, moved back to Los Angeles, then came back to New York, where he wound up working in the gift shop of the Museum of Modern Art and was able to experience all the great art in that museum on a regular basis. Now, Harter also depicted bathhouse scenes, and he drew inspiration from the 20th century gay artist Paul Cadmus, who favored classical poses. And you can see almost the lighting and the musculature of the figure with his back to you on the left and the one on the right. That's something I hadn't been aware of, and hats off to David to pointing that out. Harter was well versed in art history, and he felt it appropriate to represent gay men in idealized classical poses. Harter's justification for working in this classical academic style was that it has been customary in the slow emergence of homocentric art for artists to add on classical references to their gay images so as to give them a veneer of respectability. And I would like to add at this point, for those who are not familiar with Burt, he came from a pretty respectable family in Louisville. His dad was the leading thoracic surgeon in Louisville. Mom would go on trips with him around the world after he retired from his museum position, but she probably knew he was gay, but he did not want to discuss it while she was still around. Now, Harter worked at a museum where he was surrounded on a daily basis by mostly 19th century paintings, and he was particularly enamored with works by French academic painters. It's possible that he was familiar with paintings such as Bazille's Fisherman with a Net. And when I saw this image, I was like, I've seen that before. And it turns out it wasn't that image, but if any of you have ever been to the Fogg Museum in Cambridge, that's on the Harvard campus, there's an image, it's a little more rectangular, and I don't think there's any nudes, but it's like 10 guys at a fishing hole. And first time I saw it, I was like, oh, really? So I'd like to find out a little bit more about Mr. Frederick over there. Yeah. Have you seen his work before? Have you influenced his?
I think I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very erotic and kind of homoerotic.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for.
Okay, after moving to New York in the early 1980s, Angus began frequenting the Gaiety Theater and began documenting what took place there in his paintings. Because no photography was allowed, he had to paint from memory. Okay, how many of you ever been to the Gaiety Theater in New York, right? Only one time though, because I remember it so well because you'll see at the bottom the Howard Johnsons. That was right around the corner. The Howard Johnsons had an entrance on Broadway between 46th and 47th. And the Gaiety, the entrance, was right next to the Lunt-Fontanne Theater. And I was like a theater kid growing up. So from the time I was like 13 years old, I started going on my own. And passing into the entrance of the Lunt-Fontanne Theater was like, oh, what's going on here? I'm not sure. I asked David what the shot on the right of, because by the time it was the Gaiety as we know it, that might have been an old version of it, but they chopped it up so that it's much smaller. David, do you? Yeah. Friend of mine. Yeah, a friend of mine from high school is here. I'm delighted that he could be with us today. I did go to the Gaiety one other time, though, in the mid-'80s when I was a theater critic for a small paper there, and there was this very odd play called You, which started in the office building in Times Square. I think it's at the Times building. And each person was led by an actor through the building and the streets of Times Square. And it was like this existential monologue, like, who are you? What do you want to do with the world? Blah, 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 blah. And it took us into the Gaiety Theater for one of the scenes and then out, and it was kind of cool. But it was an interesting place. It was there from 1975 to 2005. I meant to look up what it is these days. Sorry, I didn't. But I'm sure you can find out. But it's almost like a slice of history at this point, now that we're in the digital age. Now, we can see Picasso's influence on Angus's depiction of this male stripper. He also emphasizes audience members and especially where their eyes are focused. And there's the essay that David wrote that's in the catalog goes into that. It's fascinating. All the titles he used for the Gaiety paintings were taken from the titles of songs that played while the dancers performed, such as Jimmy Cliff's reggae hit, Material World. Now in the image on the left, we can once again see the raised arm inspired by Picasso's Demoiselles. Red, Red Wine was a pop hit by UB40. I Live Among the Creatures of the Night is a lyric from a hit by Laura Branigan. In both of these paintings, Angus cuts the audience members off so that we, the viewers, are looking at the scene as if we are in the audience. This is a tradition that dates back to Toulouse-Lautrec's late 19th century paintings of Parisian nightlife. Angus has, in fact, been called the Toulouse-Lautrec of Times Square. We also see in the grand finale, which recalls a close-to-the-action perspective used by the American painter George Bellows in his well-known depiction of boxing matches in the early 20th century. And Angus documented the activities in the theater's lounge and hallways. Here, older patrons mingle with some of the performers, perhaps arranging a transaction for sexual activity. And indeed, some of these transactions were realized in the hallways. And I believe these images are in the catalog. And this one I absolutely adore. While also documenting hustling and cruising inside the theater, which showed porn movies when the strippers weren't performing, Hanky Panky is a tribute to David Hockney's famous painting, Portrait of an Artist, Pool with Two Figures. The clothed figure is, in Angus's work, is artist, I'm sorry, I think the clothed figure in Hockney's work is artist Peter Schlesinger, who grew up in Los Angeles and became Hockney's lover after Hockney was his teacher at UCLA. David actually was in an art class with Schlesinger at Portola Junior High School in Tarzana. Angus based the porn movie scene on the left on Hockney's painting on the right. And before we go into Bert's work, I just want to say, and I want you to think about it as we examine Burt's work as well, one of the challenges that Burt and Patrick faced when they were creating their body of work in the 80s and 90s, and maybe not so much Burt, because he wasn't offering his work then, but even his non-homoerotic work, was in the 80s, it was an age of abstraction, conceptual art. We had come out of the minimalism. Figurative art was out. And I'm very happy that things have come around, because I'm more of a figurativist. I'm not always into the abstract. To each his own. But what's important is not only are Burt and Angus wonderful painters, but they have, in a sense, become historians by documenting a part of the culture that has, if not entirely disappeared, certainly disappeared in many places. For example, in New Orleans, the club baths that you're going to see some images of was bought by someone in, I want to say 2008. It was right in, it closed right after Decadence, I'm sorry, not 2008, 2018. And there was some word on the street like, oh, did somebody force them to sell out, blah, blah, blah. And it was basically, somebody made the gentleman who owned it an offer he couldn't refuse. And there was word that it was going to be turned into condominiums or something, and yet it's still standing empty there today. And I suspect there are similar stories to be told about bathhouses, gay bars, other such establishments throughout the country. Well before Burt came out of the closet, he was examining gay culture in his art, partly as a way of understanding his own sexuality. In these early works, he explores a curiosity and joy of getting to know another man's private parts, and shows a popular gay fetish of the 1970s as men in hard hats, remember the village people, stand and observe while another guy gets a blowjob. Harter also painted a self-portrait in a hard hat. Now, okay, and this is the Club Bass on Toulouse Street. That pink building that you see on the left was a restaurant called Ralph and Cacoo's, which back in the 80s and up till Katrina was like super popular. It wasn't bad, but it was kind of like tourist oriented who just wanted like fried seafood. And it always amused me that you had this restaurant where the tourists from small town USA would go right next to the Club Bass. I'm sorry. In spite of the presence of female strip clubs on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, there was no equivalent of the Gaiety Theater other than maybe the Corner Pocket, but that isn't even quite the same. But there was a bathhouse in the heart of the French Quarter, the Club Baths. So Harter documented what went on there, but in his preferred classical style. He also based his drawings and paintings on photo studies that he took of models who were usually guys he met at the gym. Because he was hard of hearing, Harter preferred the baths to the bars. In these examples, we see a steam room scene and guys cruising the hallways, peering into the so-called orgy rooms. Other areas where he would see men posing or showing off were in the showers and men's rooms, both at the baths and at his gym. He also painted the scene of a male stripper at a private sex party and of a young man showing off his wares at a nude volleyball event. Not the Olympics. He also painted this scene of one of the unique characteristics of the Harter's portrayals of nude men together is that he explored affection and tenderness as seen here. He also applied that poignancy to other subjects, the most significant of which was his AIDS wall, for which he painted small portraits of men with AIDS or HIV. In the third row, the New Orleans artist Robert Gordy, who died of AIDS, is shown with figures painted in his style. At the lower right is a portrait of the famed ballet dancer, Rudolph Nureyev. So in short, Angus and Harter were pioneers in documenting gay culture. Angus was the realist who wanted to convey a sense of being there, while Harter was an idealist who treated gay men as heroic. As mentioned, neither had much success getting their work shown during their lifetimes. And you'll see in the book that Angus had a large list of places of exhibits of his work. Most of them were posthumous. So, it is time, you're going to be here, and Ruben has a presentation, and then we're going to do some questions and take questions from the audience, and onward.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, full screen.
Yeah, full screen.
Oh, full screen. Hey, can you all see it? Can you hear me? Good. So I'll be showing two bodies of work. The stuff on the left is work from the 90s to the 2000s, and these are commissioned works for Blue magazines that included Honcho, Men, Freshmen, and these were all commissioned works, and they give us absolute freedom to do whatever the heck we wanted. And so I decided that I wanted to draw or paint a beautiful thick dick. So it had to come with an attachment. So I thought I had a man to it. So again, we had a lot of full liberty to do whatever we wanted, which was great. We would show them sketches and then they would prove them. And I went through a period where I was doing all these blue guys. So that's the image on the left. And then to the right is some newer works. That is collage work. Not really a lot of drawing, but maybe I would paint colored panels and then kind of group them together. So these are the commissioned works again. I kind of have this love for collage making, so I would do these different illustrations and then kind of cut them and put them together, which was great because if I would fuck up a drawing, I can redo it and then reattach it. So again, so absolute freedom, and the directive from the art directors was that we couldn't show Miguel Angel Reyes used to always, he did the drawings as well. And remind me, we couldn't do no touching, no penetration. So I went crazy with erect penises. So these are two illustrations that I did. And the size is the largest is about 11 by 14. And I just recently discovered, I moved my art storage, and I thought I sold all of these, and I found these in a portfolio. And I was like, wow, these are great. I mean, at the time I was like, yeah, they're okay. But now I love them. And the medium is acrylic, gouache, ink, markers, and anyway, and the colors are pretty vibrant, as you can see. More illustration. So on the image on the left, I cheated because the figures were not supposed to touch each other, so I made them transparent. So almost the idea of a blowjob, but it's all line work. So that's what I got away with, the no touching situation. And this would be like a typical magazine. That's the cover of Men magazine. And so, again, we were given a full page illustration, and then it was up to you if you want to do some additional spot illustrations. And sometimes I would do like 3 to 4 illustrations and submit the best one. And then I would cut corners by cutting things and put them back on. Here's another page spread. I remember this one was not particularly erotic, and I think they actually wanted me to redo the illustration, but we didn't have much time. And I go, what's more erotic than a gun, right? It's very phallic. And so this is the illustration I did for Han Show. you would be given a story, you would read it, and it's not my narrative, so these are kind of illustrations that are in a way flat, but in a way, because it's not my story, but it was fun illustrating them. I don't know, I just lost track of oh, that's right, I'm supposed to draw a penis, but I use the gun instead. And so I would always do preliminary drawings. I kind of dig the drawings somewhat more than the actual finished product. So I would do several drawings, and usually from tissue, because I would trace from other source material from other porn magazines, but I would also use my own photography. And actually, the image on the right is my boyfriend, now husband, when I first met him. And the story was about a demonic lover. And so I thought, I'm going to make my boyfriend a demonic lover. So I styled him. And he doesn't like posing for me anymore, but he used to pose for me quite a bit. Along with the other illustrations, I found a lot of sexy photos of my still sexy husband. Thank you.
Where's that drawing now?
I have it. I found them recently, like I said, in my art storage. So I just kind of want to keep them. I don't know where it's going to end up. Maybe the one archive, or if you guys want to buy it, I'll make an offer. and then this is the second part where I'm collaging. So when I was a kid in high school, I used to do a lot of collage work. That was like my first art practice. I would steal magazines, or I would hang out at the library because I was the art nerd. And the librarian would always bring me stacks of magazines, and so I made these collages. But these collages, of course, more recent collages. But I tend to do a series of collage works now, and these are the red collages. And the idea is to give them two penises. Miguel, we talked about that earlier, about multiple penises. But the idea is that we've got to show a penis, and it's red. It's a red collage. So these are a whole series of collage works that I've shown. They're small, they're not super big. They're 16,
about how big are they?
16 by 20. And I've shown these all over, and I showed these in Mexico City, and the Mexican crowd really liked them. Because I also want to add kind of Latino imagery and not, representation. Good. So collage is my first love. The collage on the left is from some found images and found photos. The image on the right is a collaborative piece I did with a very sexy young man named Ale, and so we kind of collaborated on this image. I also touch on different subjects of, perhaps schizophrenia. Yeah. Suicide and other things that are relevant to all communities, I guess. If you go to Artsy, are you guys familiar with Artsy?
Yeah.
There's if you punch in Ruben Esparza, you'll see a whole slew of collage works. And then during COVID, I produced probably over 200 collages, because I had a lot of time. But I wanted to stray away from the super busy. I needed order, COVID, Black Lives Matter. I wanted some order in my life, so I decided to create some collages that are a little bit more minimal and organized. And so I looked to architecture, and I rediscovered Luis Barragan. Anybody familiar with Luis Barragan? He's a Mexican architect. And so I took my cue from that. But being a big fag, I thought I'm going to add some homoeroticism to it. So very subtle, but it's in there. And I'm still continuing to do these collage works, where it's mostly color theory, architecture, and then I just throw in a boy sticking his tongue out or his penis out or something to kind of queer it up. some more collage work. I have to look for myself here. I don't know. Again, it's, I have a great love for color and composition, and that's what they are. Sometimes it's, the use of color, and then again, I just throw in figure, because I do like figurative art as well. And so I try to find these very expressive faces and throw them in there. And some, angst is also very good. And
it's interesting how you use abstract art in conjunction with your figurative images.
Well, yes. I do all kinds of work too. I also do abstract art, but I don't paint and draw figures anymore. I don't know why. I'm kind of lazy. But I've not gotten lazy for looking at art. Art color. I've been fascinated lately with modernism and architecture. And Joseph Albers I rediscovered. He has a great love for art, and Luis Barragan, and I think they're kind of kindred spirits in a way. And I think when people are doing figurative work, I'm departing that and doing like compositional abstract work. And this is one of the pieces I did during COVID as well. As you can see, they're just kind of being very streamlined and just about color. And this is kind of the source material for the latest collage work I'm doing. As you can see, it kind of relates to that. And again, I use images, photographs that I take, or if I have my friends also give me stacks and stacks of porn magazines because they know I use them for my art making. And so I use that as well, juxtaposed with that, my new fascination with architecture and color theory.
That's it?
I think that's the last one. Thank you.
We just switch the seat.
Escape.
Hello, thanks for coming. My name is Min. I am Korean artist, born and raised, and then I moved to San Francisco when I was 23, and then now I'm based in full screen mode, based in Los Angeles. As you can see, I'm a huge fan of outdoor sex. So I think I developed this series of the work of the nude man. This is meeting point, like second bush from the left, like big palm tree at the Silver Lake Dog Park. Or Elysian Park. So this is also Silver Lake Dog Park. I developed this paintings during the COVID. So David asked me to collect my past work in terms of the homoeroticism. So I'm thinking about homoeroticism. To me, it's vehicle to fight against my loneliness or disconnection or solitude as a gay man. I think it's something different from the horniness. So I just said this. I just wrote this very the rough storyline that there is a meeting point, like you all remember the old Craigslist. We're meeting at 2 a.m. at the middle of the park or whatever. So that's old school of the cruising or old school of just the meeting. That's way before the grinder and way before the sneakies. So I was kind of longing for real human connection or nostalgic about classic gay cruising culture, if there's any.
What is a medium?
Medium this is a huge painting, right? Like 60 by 80. Medium is I'm using the Korean pigment.
And what does that mean?
Because Korean pigment is a powdery kind of thing. I mix with the water and the glue in order to achieve this timeless, old film grainy, like you are kind of looking through the old film or just the old faded illustration. I tried the oil or acrylics many years, but then I didn't really achieve this look that you all see right now. And also the reason there's a like outer rim of the edge is empty. So this is kind of high, it's kind of avoids I'm calculating distance of the viewer and the man just showing his ass as an invitation actually.
Emily, I mean, because this is such a unique medium, here in the States or Europe, are you familiar with any other artists, especially non-Korean artists, working in this medium?
Probably not. This is a very, well, you can say unique outside of the Korea. The funny thing is I didn't really study this medium painting, but I kind of tried to unlearn of Western medium because, well, I think the 99% of the academy, like school, they are teaching painting like oil on primed canvas. So I kind of didn't like the idea because that's the way, you know, the Rembrandt, they render some white male's portraits. So this medium is very close to me. So, and medium and material is sometimes everything. Well, another meeting point. This is the same medium. I think this is also called Silver Lake Dog Park. Yeah. Huge. Yeah. And this is a cruiser. I'm showing this series of the work at the Chicago Expo 2023. So last year. Also another cruiser. This is a cruiser at Westlake. The entire show was named at the Westlake, which is a new name of the MacArthur Park in the middle of the Los Angeles. So it's I'm blending the reality and fantasy. I think there's no one really cruising in the MacArthur Park, but I kind of just navigating, well, the fantasizing too, but then I wouldn't fantasizing the MacArthur Park. I mean, if everybody knows that where the MacArthur Park is. Yes, wherever
And just out of curiosity, with MacArthur Park, are you referencing the Donna Summer song?
Actually, I'm so it's kind of well-known kind of economically challenging transgenders community, and then I'm using a lot of the drag dress found in nearby thrift shop. So when you see that there's some detail of the red thread and some pattern, and you know there's some pattern around his hips in this painting. So that's actually I ripped off the drag dress that I found. So the thing is, the transgender women are missing and assaulted because they are different. And you know, if anybody knows the MacArthur Park, it's kids. The school kids, they call it, it's AIDS park because they believe that there's like 100 of the gay men in the bottom of the lake. So don't get near it, otherwise you'll get AIDS. That's kind of urban myth. So I really wanted to share the community, the story with the world. So I think this one show in the MCA Denver museum. This year actually. So I just wanted to share this community and this discrimination is happening 2024. So this is the time. So that's why I referenced the MacArthur Park. But Donna Summer's great. Yeah. This is another kind of I portrait the Greek mythology figure. This is and it's titled called Ambiguous Yoga Club in Runyon Canyon. Yeah. Are they doing yoga, or there's a hot naked yoga? So this is kind of satire, and also I am explore idea of the male beauty. So this is a great figure. Yeah, I can talk about this work, but then I'll just pass the next image. This is the bather. I paint a lot of men showing ass. This is a little kind of different tone. They are very tenderness, showing tenderness, not only the ass. So it's called bathers. Also Westlake. This one's a wrestler. It's a little bit kind of more colorful. Thanks. Reflection. Also was like you see a lot of the embroidery on nearby his hands.
You want to talk about the embroideries and embellishments? Because I don't think you could see the embellishments, but they all have embellishments and embroidery.
Yeah, mostly my landscape has a lot of more. Yeah. Thank you. This one is a painting called Sweet Discipline from Koreatown. That's my title of my solo show in Gabba Gallery 2023. So another or concept or another. So I told my homoeroticism is vehicle for fighting loneliness. But another vehicle is for not fighting but challenging Western male gaze. Because as a gay man living in West, so you probably know that no femme, no Asian. It's a very famous quote. So I'm kind of talk about how desexualized like Asian male and also discrimination, especially Western art history. You don't see many of the Asian figure in the museum or fine art world. So representation is the matter. So probably I made a lot of Asian male figure, this full figure. Well, normally, also challenging Western male gaze and also the showing my vulnerability as a human being and Asian. So Asians normally regard like feminine and small and less sexy, and so I'm kind of wanted to kind of counter Asian male figure and also showing tenderness. And you probably see his gaze is very challenging. Sometimes it's directly engaging to audience. And you might see the brush stroke is very rough. The nice moment. And a Mongolian wrestler. You don't really see much of this figure at the fine art world. But it's not like affirmative action or like body positivity. This is purely like my libido. I think that what the male beauties are. So, this is another Koreatown boy and full figure of the Mongolian daddy, lives in Hollywood. I think this is it. Thank you for listening.
Great stuff, both of you. And I wanted to start off, since the title of this is Homoeroticism, Then and Now. In some ways, we almost haven't fully defined homoerotic. I think we all know, but I wanted to toss this out to you because I think there might have been images in both of your works. Would you consider an image, say, from the chest up, homoerotic? Or does it fall into another category? Or what? Or I guess my question is, do you need to have a penis in it to be homoerotic?
No, I don't think so. I think it has to do with also who the artist is, right? If Tom Finland does an illustration of a man from the chest up, you think it's queer because Tom did it. But there's, but also being queer folk, we also have little signals, that we do, like maybe it could be a portrait of a boy puckering up, or he could have some sort of earring on his right ear. There's so many ways that you can depict queerness or homoeroticism. I think, I don't know where I read this. I read this a long time ago, that if you really, truly want to appreciate art, you can't be lazy. So I think it's important that you look at a lot of art, you read a lot about art, if you truly love it, because it's so expansive. But yes, it can be erotic.
Yeah, it's a bonus, like showing the penis and ass. But it could be really personal, like, I'm finding my loneliness, or we are all finding about the connection with the homoeroticism, or people of color, they are also fighting with the homoeroticism. So it's very personal.
And let me ask you this. Can a work be homoerotic, in your opinion, if it is not necessarily intended to be that way?
Well, it depends on how you read and how you resonate. Yeah, and then how you turned on by. So sometimes, because there's Japanese illustrator artist called Ziraya, and then I read an interview, and then he only paint the man he wanted to sleep with. So yeah.
I think it's also what the viewer brings, right? You could be looking at a nude at an art gallery or the museum, and you get excited, even though the artist is just depicting a nude, not necessarily, and he could be straight, but you make it a homoerotic piece because of what you bring as a viewer.
And I when I was thinking of asking that question, it just hit me, I think, when I was coming here, of a painting that I have that I got ages ago in New Orleans, about this big. It's set in a garden or a park. There's a pool, there's water, there's a statue, and it may be like an Asian or an Indian statue of a kind of imposing god, G-O-D, part of my New York accent. And there's it's like a fountain because there's water coming out of it, and there's a little boy leaning over it, like getting a drink of water from it. And the title is Boys Will Be Boys. And the artist was a woman of a certain age. I don't think it was intended that way, but when I saw it and I was with some friends, we were like, oh, that's interesting, and I've had it ever since. Let me ask you, is there anything in the works of Patrick Angus or Burton Harter that you find particularly interesting?
It's in the book. There's a piece there that I really like, but it's a study, and it has the study for, I forgot the name. And it shows this very relaxed rendering, and all the figures are in different proportions. There's no perspective.
Oh, yes.
And it seemed very freeform. And earlier you were saying Picasso was one of his heroes or whatever. But I really loved it. Oh, it's called page 24. Study for a Material World. I just love and it reminds me of that Picasso piece too that you compared it to. I just like the figures and how
Right, yes.
the enormous heads and all
Yes.
that. I kind of dug that.
When I was going through the catalog the other day, I was almost like, I wish I could ask Patrick what was his intention by making the head so out of proportion. Ken?
Well, I fascinated by all the spa painting, especially the setup, how he set up like the lighting and waiting something to happen. So I think it really captured the essence of the loneliness and the energy, horniness. But it's a very dry, not wet or not. To me, they look very kind of lonely. Yeah, we all know that feeling that after visiting spa, it's really you kind of lonely. Yeah.
How does your homoerotic work differ from other works you have made, and how does it fit into your overall vision?
My non-homoerotic work?
Yes, and these were some questions that David had prepared, and they're wonderful, so I am just reading them. How does your homoerotic work differ from other works you have made, and how does it fit into your overall vision?
Yeah, I was going to preface my presentation by saying that my overall art practice is not erotic, really, but I always have dashes of, because I think it's important to have the work be in a way of a picture of yourself too. So I always try to, like for example, I'm doing a series of flags right now, and in every flag I put thank you. I'm doing a series of flags, and I always add like in the back I would put hot pink. So when you hang it in the gallery, and if you light it a certain way, it reflects a hot pink, which kind of pink is a very important color for queer people, and so. But ironically, it's also very Mexican, and I'm Mexican. La Rosa Mexicano. I don't know if people are familiar.
Yeah.
Like hot pink is like the black in Mexico. It's like,
Really?
Yeah, hot pink.
Then I'm Mexican.
Yeah. Thanks, welcome. So again, my larger art practice is not necessarily queer, but I always throw dashes of there. And again, you can't be lazy. When you look at any artwork, no matter how good or bad or fantastic, always look for subtext, because every fucking artist is showing you just the front. But if you look further, there's more stuff in there. And even if they don't intend to show you something, they will. It's like, oh fuck, I didn't notice that. So that kind of situation. So yeah, it's always there somewhere.
Cool. I think every work that I created is homoerotic. I'm known for landscape painting. Well, you probably, when you visit my show or Instagram, there's like 99% is landscape painting. I think when you channel yourself into that sky or tree, and it's very homoerotic. There's a desire, and there's a longing and melancholy in the trees and streams. So when you see that reflection, and you can find yourself in it. So everything that I create is a homoerotic, and then I want to be read by that way.
And it's interesting because as you were saying that, I was thinking, I mean, your work, and I'm just seeing the website, just seeing now, if you took out the male figure, A, it would still be beautiful, and B, in some ways, erotic. I mean, it wouldn't be your vision, but it would still be.
Yeah, it's erotic.
Yeah, and it made me think of Mapplethorpe, where, and I'm being a little judgy here, but his works that are erotic, that are commonly defined as erotic, that got all the conservatives going crazy, I have nothing against, but it's like, okay, that's a penis. Whereas I think his works with the flowers and the orchids and the other thing, it leaves something to the imagination. And in some ways, they're more charged because it's not as blatant, at least for me.
Well, nature is erotic.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I have two more questions and we're going to open up to the audience. From David, is it easier to exhibit such work as we've been discussing today than in the time of Angus and Harter? Considering Donald Trump's Project 2025 calls for a ban on pornography and banning books has already become popular, Project 2025, or book banning has already become popular. Do you think this will impact how your work is perceived and received, and does this worry you at all?
Well, I'm not worried about at all. I mean, that's the reason I have to create more and harder to fight back.
Jonathan and I were really bummed out after Asshole got into office, or won the election, and I started thinking, I think art is really going to be amazing for the next 4 years. I think it's a fight back, and I'm not at all. I think we need to be queerer, gayer, browner, and really, be out there.
And to that, and trying to end on a more hopeful note, you guys have had wonderful careers, still have wonderful careers. What do you see in terms of your heirs, younger guys, artists, and their perception of the erotic? Do you see it changing? What do you see the future holding?
It's really hard to give a short question, especially younger generation, Gen Z or Gen Alpha, they see eroticism a little differently. They have OnlyFans, and so it's different. But then I believe the core of the desire is the same throughout all the generation. Just embrace the life. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's going to be out there in many, many different forms. I think maybe digital AI. People are all scared of AI, but I think once artists harness it, it'll be amazing. Right now it's in infancy, but I still love the old idea of pencils and canvases and cut paper and painting. I don't think that will ever die.
Thank you. When you said you could give a long answer to that question, I was like, well, we do have a time limit here. But who has questions out there? Raise your hands. Don't be shy. Yes.
Your mixed media here with the glue and the pigments. Are you on canvas or?
It's a raw canvas, but I applied raw canvas, but you really cannot paint oil or something on raw canvas because you need the binder, and so I put lots of the Japanese bookbinding glue, and it gives you a tooth of the texture, so that it really hugs the fabrics and embroidery thread and crystal beads. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
So some other hands. Yeah.
My question's for Ken. So I always get very curious about the repetitive motifs the artists use. So I noticed the flowers and the waves. Is there any significance to you?
Flower, could be the metaphor of everything, but then basically I love flowers. And the repetitive motif, and you've probably seen the swirl and painting. I think you've probably noticed that I am a figurative painter, but there's an element of the abstraction and stroke So I consider that as my meditative conversation happening in the story or the painting and all the process.
So the topic homoeroticism then and now, I guess the artists that were set off this sort of presentation were working in a time when homoerotic imagery was pretty, compared to today, rare and kind of had to be sought out. And that's certainly not as true today. It's sort of like hot and cold running porn 24 hours a day, instantly accessible. And I wonder if either of you can respond, or both of you can respond, but how is that availability of homoerotic imagery affecting your practice, and have you seen a change in the audience over that sort of period of time?
I like to think that as I train my eye looking at a lot of artwork, I found Caravaggio very erotic in Michelangelo, and then it turns out they're faggots, right? So, but they're through the lens of the church, right? But if you really look at a lot of artwork from the Renaissance and on, there's a lot of homoeroticism. Not necessarily because the artists were queer, but the body was celebrated because by way of the Catholic Church and all of that. I don't know. I always feel that there is always erotic art. You just have to find it. Does that answer your question? No.
Ken, you want to take it?
So,
If you were going to the Vatican, 300 years ago, that was a pretty small number of people.
Yeah.
You saw that. Today, there's erotic imagery of every sort available all the time. And I guess, have you seen a change? Is that affecting your work or your audience?
like you kind of becoming numb, especially because I mentioned about the OnlyFans and just for fans, so all the homoerotic images, the Twitter, it's everywhere. So you're kind of getting numb. It's not hot anymore because there's 100 of the penises dangling around, so it's not hot anymore. So I think and also speaking of masters, because I just switched the picture, so this Asian man holding some flower, this composition is from Tom of Philip. So I influence a lot of old masters, they are my school and church.
So, yeah.
I have a question, kind of expanding on what you just asked. I love all your works, and I saw kind of your work at the Syrian Gallery in Madrid, and I'm blown away.
Thank you.
Some of the images you showed here, but my question is about the images at the gallery, which is a big gallery in Los Angeles, were a little bit coded or ironic, instead of they were not overtly sexual, like the earnings you showed today with the penises and stuff. So I guess my question to you as doing both is, how do galleries react to the coded, meaning, that you lost the interview that you showed, the sisters, the Hercules versus the direct penises? Do you get pushback or not? How things change? That's my question.
I think that's an awesome question. So I wish I could show some image because I am showing my painting on Esparza and Min. It's December 4th. It's a solo booth, so it's kind of big. But I made a painting with the two men wrestling on the field with the flower. It's a big painting. No one from the gallery really asked about anything. It's a sensual but then, well, I happen to change something else. Not because I afraid of the showing or not because I wasn't confident about it. I sometimes was strategically approach the audience. How can I deliver my the message more sophisticated manner? So
So that comes with a code, like it has to be coded.
it's more coded, and also I think the galleries they are totally open about the homosexuality and LGBTQ artists. So that's how they embrace because of so but we cannot discuss because there's a like big gallery or big art fair, there's a kids and there so we talk. It's kind of still ongoing, the conversation.
I think that art collectors and art galleries like to position themselves as polite society, or people with fantastic taste and beautiful homes, that the idea of showing a big bulging penis is not in good taste. So, so a lot of artists that like to do erotic work, I don't show my erotic work. I show my erotic work like places like the Finland Art Fair, or places like that where you can show big gaping holes and huge penises. But I'm happy to do a coded piece as well. And it's almost like a challenge where you're trying to do this sensual piece of work that is coded, and it's almost like it's our inside joke, right? Like a homo could come to it and say, "Oh, I noticed that you put a little, Vaseline jar at the end of the bed." You know what I mean? So it's that's also, I also like coded work, because I love Caravaggio because his work is also chock full and coded, but it's also the Pope loves it too, which brings it for a broader market. But I think coded, uncoded, it's all good.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask, made me think of this, and I'm going to put in a little plug for the John Burton Harter Foundation website. If you were interested and enjoyed the panel today, please go to our website. If you Google John Burton Harter Foundation, it'll take you right there. You can see the videos of the panels in New Orleans and New York. There's also the video of my interview with Charles Leslie of the Leslie Lohman Museum. And I mentioned that because he and his partner have an apartment in Soho in New York that they refer to as the Penis Palace. Because you walk in there and there are paintings, photos, sculptures, and objets d'art. And when I say everywhere, I mean everywhere. Walls, floors, ceilings, all featuring peni. And at the same time, these are not erotic art just for the sake of being. They're all very fine, high quality art. I'm just curious, of all the people, raise your hands or not if you don't want to. How many of you would have erotic art in your apartment? I mean, and I guess I'm talking out broadly, because I have a work that I got a while ago by a French artist, René Guyot, who's worked with, I think, Oscar de la Renta, one of the main fashion designers doing art. And it was a commercial artist for a men's cologne, where you see this hot guy just from his back, where he's just wearing slippers, and you see his tush there, and it's not erotic, but it isn't and all that. So anyway, I think it's interesting that it doesn't seem to be as, you can't show this anymore, or like in La Cage aux Folles, you have to hide it when the in-laws come over.
Yeah, and then I have to add most of the collector who bought my the ass painting, they were straight.
Okay.
Yes, I was surprised, and I think well-educated people appreciate the culture and they just know the beauty, what the beauties are. So the beauty is beauty, whether it's ass or pain.
One more question, yes.
Did Angus and Harter know one another? Did their paths ever cross? I realize Angus is younger by 15-ish years, but died earlier, but their lifespans did overlap.
No, from what I understand, Bert expressed to Charles Leslie that he admired him I don't think their paths ever crossed. That was a quick one. One more. Yes.
This question actually goes off of what Ken just said about the beauty. And when I hear about beauty, I connect it with universalism. So I wanted to ask both of you to share more thoughts about balance between universalism and something more culturally specific in your thoughts about design in your works.
I like that saying, the personal is universal. We're all human beings, right? We all have urges, we all fall in love, we all do sorts of things that kind of connects us. So I think I encourage artists or people that are in the arts to do their personal work. But that also speaks to like a larger conversation in our humanism. We're all human. And so, yeah. Does that answer your question? What do you think?
So questions about, I forgot, the desire and the beauty. And it's such a good question, and it's such a core, and I'm thinking so many the words are just floating my brain. I just trying to channeling my vulnerability, and then that really deeply connect to the desire, what I want to see and what I want to do. And then if you execute that as an artist with the bravery, I think that's the beauty.
I don't think we can end. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we are here for another hour or so. There's refreshments. Please enjoy.